folks, there's going to be a major initiative on the ballot in Florida on November that could very well restore the voting rights to 1.6 million formerly incarcerated folks. Now, this is a huge issue because when you look across this country as we speak, there are 2.3 million people who are sitting in jail or prison. About 184,000 on the federal level, but the rest are in state and local jails. And many of these laws that prevent the formerly incarcerated from voting date back to the 1800s. Well, today, the Advancement Project released a new report detailing the impact of these laws on Black communities in Florida, and it shows how devastating it is. Joining us right now is the director of the Advancement Project, Judith Browne Dianis. Judith, how you doing? Okay, I can't hear Judith, folks, so let's just try it again. All right. Help me out again, folks. I want to be able to hear Judith. Okay, there you go. All right. Okay, so it's real faint, so if y'all could turn her audio up on your end, I would greatly appreciate it. Judith, when we look at just these numbers, 1.6 million folks who are coming back to communities, disproportionately, it's impacting Black folks more than any other group in Florida. Right,
that's right, Roland. There are, out of Floridians, 2 out of 10 Floridians are African American, but 4 out of 10 returning citizens are African American. So we know these are huge swaths of people who are returning citizens coming back to their communities. And what they're finding is when they get back to their neighborhoods that they are living in neighborhoods that have higher poverty rates, childhood poverty rates, higher unemployment, lower educational attainment. And at the end of the day, what we know that means is that these are folks who can't vote. If you can't vote, you don't have political voice. If you don't have political voice, that impacts your community and the ability to hold elected officials accountable.
And when we talk about those numbers, not only are they coming back, they're coming back not being able to find jobs. They're coming back not being able to access resources. So as a result, you now have individuals who are in communities who are being limited in what they're able to do. That has a ripple effect in other areas in those neighborhoods.
That's right. So in Florida in particular, the law isn't just about voting. What it does is that it takes away your civil rights. And so returning citizens also, when you lose your civil rights in Florida, that also means that there are certain jobs that you can't do because you can't get a license. So, for example, one of the leading spokespeople of this initiative in Florida, Desmond Meade, is someone who is a returning citizen who actually went to law school and graduated but cannot practice law because he is a person with a former felony conviction. So we know that, it impacts jobs, it impacts community. If you can't vote, you can't have a say, for example, in school board elections. So you have children, but you have no say. So we have to put this in context, though. What is important is that, first of all, there's 6.1 million people across the country who cannot vote because of felony convictions. Florida is one of 4 states that allows a lifetime of disenfranchisement. So the problem is that we have these convictions. We know that mass incarceration has hurt Black communities and brown communities, but we know that also that the consequences of mass incarceration do not end when someone walks out of the prison doors. And so, unfortunately, our communities are feeling it. And so, at the end of the day, the report that we put out maps where those people are, the concentrations of those people. We need to find them. We need to make sure that their families are voting on their behalf, and hopefully we'll see a change in November.
And, of course, the voting registration deadline is October 9th. And so folks are talking about vote, 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 but you got to be registered to vote first. And one of the things that we've also been encouraging, Judith, the formerly incarcerated, is that even though they can't vote, they can still drive folks to the polls.
That's right.
They can still work hard to make this initiative happen. It needs 60% of all voters to pass it to change the state constitution. This is, I don't think people really understand how earth-shattering this will be if this initiative is able to pass with 60+% of the vote.
Yep, Roland, if you go to our website, advancementproject.org, we actually have a map of the whole state of where those returning citizens are. And so you could imagine that it's going to change the state politically, but also that it's going to give people back their political voice. And we're going to be able to do things like change the criminal justice system. We're going to be able to change educational outcomes for our communities. And so this is really important. And the thing is that we need to make sure that Black folks turn out in huge numbers, because the people who are impacted are the people who don't have a voice. But their family members, their friends, their church members, all can vote for them.
I want to bring in our panel here, of course, Eugene, Avis, as well as Michael. Michael, this is an issue that we see all across this country. Judith, do this for a favor. Tell folks what you said this morning in the Tom Joyner Morning Show, that this dates back in Florida to the 1800s.
Yes. So Florida's law was actually passed in 1868. So you have 1865, free the slaves. And then right after, African Americans see this wave of laws that were put in place to disenfranchise newly freed African Americans. So Florida's was 1868. And while they did some changes after that, the impact of it has been the same on the Black community.
Michael, Avis, and Eugene, thoughts?
Well, first, I'd like to give Judy some props because she keeps using the term returning citizens. Thank you very much. I want to take some credit for that, Roland. As you know, Marion Barry and I wrote that legislation to change the term of ex-offenders to returning citizens. Obviously, may he rest in peace, Marion Barry and I thought it was time to change the stigma of what the title of ex-offenders meant as opposed to what it means to be a returning citizen. Relative to the legislation, elections have consequences. And until you have the kind of representative that you want representing you in your particular jurisdiction, these kind of laws are going to continue to fester. Washington, D.C., for example, is one of the more states that looks out for returning citizens. As soon as you get home, you can vote, how it should be anywhere else, especially if you are lucky enough to get a job, you're paying taxes. So why can't you vote? And as you mentioned, as Judy mentioned, getting your families involved is a part of making sure that elections have consequences.
I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say absolutely. However, what's very important about this law is that, quite frankly, it is not accidental that this was something that was put in place as a backlash to the emancipation of enslaved Africans. And it's not accidental that a version of this still remains. It's actually very purposeful because it serves the purpose of trying to shift the dynamics of future elections. If you have 1 million+ people who cannot vote, and it's your belief that a large percentage of those persons will vote against your political interest or your politics, then it's in your interest to make sure that they cannot vote. And that's why it's so exciting to see now that we have the power in Florida to change the dynamics of that in terms of this next election. And if Florida is successful in flipping the script, so to speak, and making sure that returning citizens are able to regain their right to vote, I'm hopeful that this will be a blueprint that can be copied in other states so that felony disenfranchisement and other measures that have been put in place all across this country to depress the vote specifically of the Black community can be struck down one right after the other.
I agree 100% with Michael and Avis. I'm actually of the belief that you shouldn't lose the right to vote when you are incarcerated. You don't lose your right to free speech. You shouldn't lose your right to vote. But the Advancement Project that's going on in Florida is absolutely amazing. I hope that the initiative passes this cycle. If 1/10 of that, 1.6 million voted in 2016, Donald Trump doesn't win Florida.
Absolutely.
And so, in Maryland, we've taken a step further. We've taken that step of giving giving newly returned citizens the right to vote back, and are taking steps to deal with licensing, especially when it comes to occupational licenses.
And Judith, to that particular point, look, if this is able to pass, this is going to change politics up and down the political ladder in Florida, because, look, you're not going to have people who are going to be so quick to run on, I'm Mr. and Mrs. Law and Order. They're going to have to consider what those folks think. And when you're talking about adding 1.6 million people to the voting rolls, that changes the entire state.
That's right. You know, this is no little thing. I mean, of course, it's been in place since 1868. So it's no little thing. And what we're doing is that we are part of the coalition that is there working on this issue. But we're not just talking about this initiative. We're getting prepared for winning. We're getting prepared for what we're going to do on the other side. So we're building out chapters of returning citizens across the state with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, because, you know, when you win things, then you got to be ready to step into the power that you have. And so we want to make sure that returning citizens have a say. So you could imagine all of criminal justice issues will be on the table, and people will be voting around that issue. 1.6 million people who will have a say about how the incarceration beast has been devastating our communities. And so this is a big deal. And as Ava said, you know, this is not just Florida, right? We will see a sweep. If it happens in Florida, believe me, we're going back to Virginia, where we were able to get a big win through the governor, but we need a constitutional amendment in Virginia. So we're just hoping that we're going to be able to get black folks out to make sure that they turn out to be the voice for those people who don't have a voice in our system, because if they do, all things will change.
And Roland,
first of all, yeah, Michael, go ahead, because while you're doing that, I'm texting Sheena Mead as well as Desmond Mead.
Good.
Of course, they're leading this initiative, and new polling literally just came out. So, Michael, while you're talking, I'm telling Sheena to send the polling data ASAP so I can read it right now. So, Michael, you go ahead and make your comment, and then I'm waiting for this email.
Well, part of the challenge is with criminal justice reform, sentencing reform, prison reform, whatever you'd like to call it, is sometimes there's a stigma attached, clearly, and Judy knows the statistics better than all of us, about how many folks that impacts, whether it's black and brown people. However, there are large amounts of white folks, too. And the message has to be much more encompassing, because the opponents to this will make it a black and brown issue, which then a lot of white constituency groups will then want to buck that. But if they know their nephew also can't vote when they come back to home and sometime somewhere in Kentucky or West Virginia, they're going to fight just as hard. So we have to make sure, yes, we know who it impacts, we know about the statistics. However, it has to be a more encompassing argument in creating different communities.
I would say that, you know, I work with Sheena as part of the Black Women's Roundtable, and they have been very strategic and purposeful about creating a universal message around this, precisely to the point that you were just making. They were mentioning, even when they were having the petitions to get this on the ballot, they were actually going to Trump rallies and getting people to sign the petition. And so it has, I'm very interested in seeing this new polling data, but I know with previous polling data, it has been something that has been very much supported, not only in black and brown communities, but I think to a lot of people's surprises, a significant proportion of the white community is in favor of it as well.
Right. Because they're impacted too, and also, and you know, most people believe in second chances. Like that's what they say about this amendment. This is the Second Chances Amendment, and you know, whether you're a religious leader, you know, the Koch brothers are entering into the scene to be supportive. You know, where we thought that they would just be about the reform issues, criminal justice reform.
Judith, hold on one second. So Sheena, the email is taking too long, so I'm actually live right now. So why don't you just tell me what the new polling data says? I actually have you on the digital show. So what does it say?
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks, Roland. We just released today that we are still polling at 74% across the state, holding with 74% of voters still saying yes, that they support Amendment 4.
So you're polling at
so
right now you're polling at 74% across the state.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And okay, so gotcha. All right, so I will look. Go ahead.
And and so I just want to highlight that right now we have over 88% support from Democrats that strongly support this initiative, and we're still close to 60% of conservatives that still support this initiative.
So 88% of Democrats are in support of this initiative, and about 60% of Republicans.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, Sheena, we're definitely going to have you and Desmond back on. Thank you for giving us the latest polling data. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right. So there y'all go.
Listen, I would say this. That should scare, on the flip side, the crap out of every single Republican running in Florida that's running on this super law and order. I think, that poll right there, Judy mentioned earlier, the Koch brothers are behind this, Freedom Partners supporting this, Mark Holden and crew. DeSantis, I think that poll right there shows, how and why, DeSantis is down against Gillum. When you go out there and you try to scare people and you make it about, oh my gosh, the black candidate is going to let all the violent black people out going to come out and terrorize your neighborhood, and you get numbers like that where 60% of conservatives are supporting second chance and 80% of Democrats, you cannot be a Christian conservative and not be in support of giving folk a second chance. That is literally what the entire basis of the Christian religion is on, second chances. So I think the polling is not necessarily shocking, and I think election day is going to be a good day here.